You are the world's biggest ham. Yeah, I know. You're always here. You want nothing to do with this desk. Camera comes out. There's Teddy. There's question mark. Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna give this back. Why, hello there, endurance nerds. It's a brand new year, and it's the same old me, live and in stereo. If you're new here, I'm really happy for you, or I'm really sorry that this happened to you. You can let me know which one of those sentiments is correct as we make our way through this journey of a video together. But it's 2025. Ugh. You know what? I'm going to be positive about it. Despite being the 5th year running of what's bound to be an uncertain and turbulent year, I'm just going to focus on the things that I can control and keep moving forward and just be cautiously optimistic that everything is going to work out well for everybody, including all of you out there. So thank you for joining me. And what better way to be positive and happy than to talk a little shit on the internet? I mean, I've been cultivating that skill since the day I came out of the womb. That's a really, really, really long time. But let's get into the shit talk, shall we? I think some of my malaise as I come into this new year is being driven by what's been mounting over the past, let's say 18 months to 2 years, of just being exhausted with constantly feeling like I'm being sold to. I can't eat, I can't shit, I can't even sleep without feeling like somebody's trying to separate me from my money.
You gonna give me my money? Where's my money, man?
Doesn't matter where I look. Sales everywhere. And this isn't some old woman screaming at cloud.
You sure about that?
Nor is it an anti-capitalist rant. Capitalism has allowed me to be privileged enough to live in the United States, in a safe neighborhood, making an income that affords me the opportunity to move through life without feeling like I need to worry about where my next meal is coming from, how I'm gonna pay to put a roof over my head, allow me to put some savings away for an emergency, be able to put away for retirement to hopefully have some stability as I get older and more decrepit than I already am.
It's been 84 years.
And also have enough left over to pursue all those ADHD-fueled impulse purchases for the next hobby that I want to pursue this week. And spending money is just part and parcel with not only survival, but really entertaining ourselves and giving ourselves purpose through our lives. There are very few things in this world that are completely free. And innovation has been primarily fueled by having a marketplace of ideas, of services, things that we can buy where people are going to sell something, make a profit, reinvest those profits into further research and development to make new things that will help us to solve problems. And I'm not simply talking about convenience or hedonistic pursuits. I'm talking about our fundamental safety and security have been improved by the fact that we have a marketplace that is going to market and advertise to us. So I'm not naive enough to think that we're going to be able to operate through life with no marketing and no ads whatsoever. I think what really grates on me more is the blurring of the lines. Internet, and more specifically social media, has introduced a lot more perverse incentives in terms of how things are sold and marketed to the consumer. You know, I believe that on balance, being able to monetize a social media profile or channel is a net positive. Hell, this channel is monetized. I think being able to recuperate some money for your outlay in equipment or other expenses that come with making videos that are not free for pretty much anyone, by the way, and maybe take a little money for your time and energy, I think that's all fair game. And doing it by placing advertisements that the people who are watching your video know are ads are all fair game. But then we started to smuggle in a whole litany of other pernicious elements that are attached to this whole monetization. We're saturating these platforms with people who are just monetizing things that they would have done for free already, and then trying to manipulate the system to capitalize on things like sponsorships, which unto itself isn't necessarily problematic. But there are a number of perverse incentives that come along with it. Whether it's people not disclosing it despite the terms of service, maybe it's people who are not necessarily sponsored at this time, but they are trying to ingratiate themselves to a brand so they're not being honest with their opinions, or they're leveraging provocative or controversial titles that are playing on trending services or products so that they can get those clicks, and they're not delivering on that value. I can go on and on in a diatribe in terms of the abuses of how people are monetizing social media and the internet at large. My point is that most people can't tell when they're being sold to anymore. Advertisers and marketers that are working for companies, they're gonna ask you for that sale. They're gonna tell you what they're selling, they're gonna tell you for how much, and they're gonna tell you where you go to get it. But more and more often, people who are online trying to be educators or creators in the space are more implicitly selling you things, and they're not telling you what the end goal is. And nowhere is this more prevalent than in the health and fitness space. And if you include weight loss in the mix, we're talking about revenue dollars that are coming into this industry that are almost incalculable. Fitness brands, influencers, channels, what have you, are oh so ready to sell you on this year's latest dumbbells that are scientifically proven to be 15% better, God knows how that is, than the old models that you can get on Craigslist for free or dirt cheap or find at a local garage sale. They want to sell you on the most trendy, high-intensity interval training that you can get video on demand, or you can go to some special gym with strobe lights and fancy paint on the wall, spending $80 a month for the same HIIT training that you can probably find for free and do in your living room on YouTube, or get included with your standard gym membership. You're being preyed upon by sexy marketing that people know will sell. And of course, the grand poobah are supplements. And that's the topic of this video. I think the major wrinkle with supplements is that it's very difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff. Now, I am almost invariably going to get some puritanical comment down below that's going to say that all you need is sleep, nutrition, and good training, and you don't need supplements at all. And while objectively that is largely true, it's kind of a red herring. I would challenge any one of those people who makes that claim to point to an Olympian, elite athlete, a professional who has not extracted the most out of themselves in their training by employing at least one or two safe and legal supplements. I'm not saying that facetiously, I'm saying that in earnest. I always advocate for people doing the basics brilliantly. That triangle of sleep, nutrition, and good training is what you need to do first. And if you get yourself to 85% of what we'll call perfect, now you're starting to look at diminishing returns or marginal gains and wanting to perhaps break through a plateau or to be able to get the most out of yourselves or recover faster or perform that little bit better, looking for some modest gains that we can get through supplements that are going to supply a compound or molecule in a concentration or a quantity that cannot be accessed through simple nutrition. I don't fault anybody for wanting to do that. We can talk about whether or not it's ethical or healthy, but that's a topic for a completely different video. And if you're absolutely not interested in supplements whatsoever, and that you're looking for me to validate the claim that supplements on the whole are a scam, you may as well click away right now, because I don't think that on the whole they're a scam. But I do think there's a lot of dishonesty in the health and fitness space.
Think, darling, think. There must be something really rotten we can do today.
From people who are looking to turn a dollar on you, even from people who aren't on the take for these specific businesses. And I'm hoping to help you to make a more informed decision about supplements, whether they're appropriate to incorporate into your routine, how you can use them, and the potential trade-offs. Because let's face it, there are very few things in life that are all upside and no downside or trade-off. And I want to talk through some big hitters that see a lot of discussion in the fitness and health space. And this list is not going to be exhaustive. You'd have to listen to me make mouth noises for an awfully long time to get through the entire list, but I do want to talk about ones that get a lot of attention. And everything I'm going to talk about in this video is considered generally safe in the dosages that are recommended. They are currently legal, both from a criminal statute perspective as well as an anti-doping perspective. But I'm going to be talking about some of the espoused benefits, what you can expect out of these different types of products, what the side effects or trade-offs are, and whether or not it might be right for you to implement into your routine. And I want to break down these supplements into 4 different categories. The first one is proven effective. Those supplements that are proven to have a performance benefit. And I want that to be clear where I'm talking about training and performance, because these different supplements are going to land in completely different buckets if we're talking about general health and wellness. We're talking specifically about performance. The second category I want to talk about is promising to be effective, but maybe there's a paucity of research that we can't quite declaratively say that there is a performance impact by taking them. But I do want to talk through those, and those are the supplements that you might want to proceed with tempered expectations. The third one is overhyped. It's not that it doesn't have an effect or an impact or can't have some sort of performance improvement, but it's either not what is being stated, or it can be better achieved through other means that are either cheaper or more effective. And then the last category I'll talk through is straight up snake oil. There's no justification whatsoever for taking these from a performance standpoint, and more than likely no justification whatsoever for taking them, period. So without any further ado, let's get into the list. So the first supplement or substance we're going to talk about should come as no surprise to anybody. It's caffeine. It's one of the longest standing and most proven supplements or substances out there. In fact, once upon a time, caffeine was banned from an anti-doping perspective. Every once in a while, people will kick off the dust of that conversation and wonder if this is the year that WADA decides to ban it yet again. I do believe that in this case, Pandora's box has already been opened and it's going to be very difficult to close that box back up, but you never know. Anti-doping agencies can be fickle at times, but they are looking, when they ban a substance, at 2 things that are really inextricably connected. The first is, does it create an outsized training or performance benefit? And the second thing is, does it create a health or safety risk to the athlete? And the reality is two is related to one. Nobody's going to take on the risk to their health or safety if it isn't going to give them an outsized performance benefit. And caffeine, for the most part, falls into category 1, and maybe, if inappropriately used, could fall into category 2. The performance benefits of caffeine are going to come through a few different ways. The first is being that improved focus, which can actually be critical in those close quarter competitions, things that require you to make split-second decisions about where you're going to go, what you're going to do. The next benefit you're going to get is from the fact that the caffeine is a stimulant. It's going to increase your alertness, increase that energy. And in turn, those benefits are going to increase your time to exhaustion or improve your fatigue resistance, which basically means you can go harder for longer. Now, the data and research seems to indicate that people can expect somewhere between a 2 and 5% improvement in performance. And the expected benefit is going to be based on a few things. Obviously, the dosage, we'll talk about that in a second. Your experience as an athlete, the more experienced you become, the less headroom you have for those marginal gains to come from performance-enhancing supplements, which means you're probably going to be on the lower end of that improvement, and beginners that have more headroom are going to be on the higher end of that improvement. And then how habituated you are to using caffeine. People who drink 4 to 5 cups of coffee just to walk around and function in the world may see less of a benefit, if a benefit at all. But we're talking about population averages here, and this is going to go for every supplement that I talk about. There is a mean or average expected benefit, and then we are all going to fall somewhere in that distribution around the mean. Some of us might be hyper responders. Some of us might be non-responders. We might have extreme outliers in the bunch. On average, we're seeing those performance benefits be anywhere between 2 and 5%. And 2 to 5% is a pretty good return for somebody who's already optimizing their training, their sleep, and their nutrition. On average, the dosages to elicit this type of response are between 3 and 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, generally 30 to 60 minutes before some sort of execution. And then if you are part of a protracted event, maybe it's like a long course triathlon or a long bicycle race, knowing that the half-life of caffeine is about 5 hours, you can look for a more modest replacement dose along the way using some sort of caffeinated gel or caffeinated sports drink. But you can calculate out, based on your beginning dose of caffeine, how much you want to maintain over what period of time, knowing that that half-life is about 5 hours. So putting that into perspective, for a 70-kilogram rider, you're looking at somewhere between 210 and 420 total milligrams of caffeine. In normal coffee drinkers' terms, that's about 2 to 4 cups of standard coffee. Now, understanding that you're taking that short time horizon of 30 to 60 minutes and concentrating that pretty hefty dose of caffeine, if you're going to do that with coffee, you're adding a lot of extra liquid to what's already a caffeine affecting your bowel and your bladder in a pretty substantial way. For those of you who drink your morning cup of joe, you'll know that your morning constitutional probably comes in short order thereafter. So you need to be cautious as to how taking your caffeine strictly through that liquid format, how that's going to impact your GI response. Plenty of athletes, including professionals, have overdone it on the caffeine, whether it's from coffee or other sources. And one of the major side effects of using high doses of caffeine is that gastrointestinal impact. But for those larger doses, usually people are looking for more than just a standard cup of coffee. They're either concentrating it in terms of an espresso that's higher caffeine for less liquid. They're using some kind of pre-workout, pill format. There's a number of different ways to take in that caffeine, but suffice to say, you need to experiment and understand how that impacts your body. Now, there's additional side effects as well. One of those being those jitters, right? That energy leakage that you get, that nervous energy if you overdo it on caffeine. Now, some of that might be ameliorated when you are doing a high intensity effort or some kind of event, because now you're focusing that energy somewhere into working muscles, but it's not always that effective. Another side effect is that increased heart rate. Usually caffeine increases the heart rate a little, but overdoing it can spike it quite a bit. And it almost is like that adrenaline response. And that might sound like it's great for performance, but realistically, that adrenaline response is for fight or flight. It's that quick apex of energy followed by a crash. And you'd be surprised at how inefficient you can get at focusing your energy on the working muscles that you need to execute when your heart rate is going crazy, blood is pumping everywhere, you have all this energy leakage. So it's not as quick and easy as just taking in a massive amount of caffeine and you feel like Superman or Superwoman. There's also secondary impacts of things like dependency or adverse reactions with other types of supplements or medications that you might be using. So suffice it to say, you need to proceed with caution. Caffeine is considered a drug.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
And you need to treat it accordingly. We've normalized it because it's in our coffee, in our sodas, things that we interface with every day, but megadosing on caffeine for performance is not without potential consequences. So please be mindful of that. that and use it with caution. The next supplement on the list actually surprised me that it was more than a fad, and there's actually some reasonable science to back this up, and that's beetroot juice or some sort of isolated nitrate supplement. What nitrates or beetroot juice does is helps to make that oxygen delivery a little bit more efficient. The benefits that play out in the data is about 1 to 3%, but it's very specific that performance benefit seems to come out in more endurance events, specifically things that are more steady state, like a time trial, like a marathon or half marathon, some longer form steady state cardiovascular. We're talking about efforts that are going to be maybe in your tempo zone or maybe into your low threshold. When we're looking at beetroot juice, it's going to be around that 16 ounces. It's really tough to play out dosages considering the different ways that you can take in nitrates. You're going to have to look for the standard dosages, and that serving is going to be taken a bit before exercise, actually 2 to 3 hours before exercise. So the turnaround of the benefits is not going to be quite as rapid as what we saw with the caffeine or some of the other supplements that I'm going to talk about. The side effects with beetroot juice are primarily things start to turn red. I don't know how many people who work in the healthcare industry can tell me how many times per year you see somebody in the emergency room for red urine or stool, and it turns out just to be beets, but it can be a little off-putting. But if you are drinking beetroot juice or eating a lot of beets, be prepared for things to just kind of turn red, including some potential reddening of the skin. It's pretty harmless, but it's a little bit off-putting. But otherwise, there really aren't any particular side effects or major downsides other than the fact that prepackaged beetroot juices or powders or even nitrate shots can be a bit pricey. A lot of times these supplements taste like dirt. As an aside, a couple years ago, if you guys have been around that long, I can't remember which video it was, but I was doing like some kind of Zwift race or workout, and I decided to try for the first time SIS or Science in Sport. It was a nitrate gel. In fact, they don't even make them anymore. And I almost threw up right on the bike. This shit tasted like pennies. It was really, really bad. I was so distracted by the awful taste in my mouth that A, I couldn't finish it, and B, I wouldn't have been able to discern an impact on my performance if I tried. I'm sure that they've improved over the years on making something a bit more palatable, and I know that if you tend to mix an actual strict beetroot juice or powder with something like a citrus juice, you can help to attenuate some of that taste. There's also the ability to acclimate to bad flavors, but those are really the turnoffs for beetroot juice or nitrate supplementation. It's not particularly sexy. It doesn't really impact your high end, but for those of you who are more engaged with those longer steady state events, you may find that beetroot juice is effective for you. Next supplement on the list, it's one I really like talking about because this is a subject that comes up a lot on this channel, and that's beta-alanine. And what beta-alanine does is helps to assist in buffering that lactic acid that we're always talking about, that buildup of hydrogen ions in the system when you are superseding your body's ability to naturally clear that lactate. What beta-alanine does is it helps the body to delay that time to fatigue or muscular breakdown with giving your body some additional horsepower in buffering out those hydrogen ions. It's not limitless. The data seems to indicate somewhere between a 1 and 4% performance improvement, and those improvements are going to come by way for more power for the same amount of time or the same amount of power for longer. Is going to play out differently in different athletes, but your 1 to 4 minute power above your lactate threshold, so you're talking your VO2 max into your anaerobic execution of power, that's where you're going to see the benefits in beta-alanine. Seems like a lot of upside, right? But there are some caveats. The effective dosage for beta-alanine is 4 to 6 grams per day. It's something that you need to generate habitual use and saturation to really yield the most benefit. This is something that you're going to take over the period of whether it's a building phase of your training block or your race phase, because you're not going to see those improvements in perpetuity. So you want to find a finite period of time where you saturate the system and maybe you use that beta-alanine for several weeks or a couple of months. You maximize your training or your performance with the beta-alanine, and then you taper off of it, and then you might repeat the cycle again at a more opportune time down the road. You can find beta-alanine in standalone pills. You can find them in pre-workout supplements. It's relatively inexpensive and very accessible, and it's realistically a very safe supplement. The one pesky side effect is that tingling sensation. It's not like a niacin flush. It's more like a pins and needles sensation, and it can be off-putting, especially if you're not familiar with it or if you take a high dosage. You really don't want to take that maximum dosage, that 6 grams, all at once. You want to break that up throughout the day to somewhat attenuate some of those side effects. And even in the smaller doses, you can still potentially feel that tingling sensation, but it's more isolated to muscle contraction. It's an interesting dichotomy between being an annoying side effect, but also kind of a tangible feedback loop that tells you that, the supplement might be doing something. But the real trade-off here, other than that side effect, is the fact that you're going to have to budget for a more long-term utilization and build it as a part of a habit. It really doesn't have a particularly acute benefit. You might get some, but realistically, beta-alanine is not something that you're going to take once before a race and glean that maximum impact. You really need to saturate the system and use it more habitually. The next supplement I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to belabor this point too much because I think it's pretty clear for anybody in this space that creatine, specifically creatine monohydrate, is a very well-studied and proven performance-enhancing supplement with very few downsides or side effects. Now, the impact of creatine is that improved high-end energy expenditure, the ability to build muscle, and some improved recovery. Now, on its face, creatine is more commonly used by people who are in those power sports or in the strength world. A lot of weightlifters swear by using creatine, and rightfully so. In terms of endurance sports, it's kind of a mixed bag. It's going to be more impactful for those mixed intensity efforts where you're going to use your high-end, building that muscle mass, becoming better at those explosive efforts with the help of creatine can be very effective for the endurance athlete. But we will talk about some of the hesitation behind using it here in a moment. I would recommend creatine for endurance athletes that are starting to get up there in that master's realm and beyond. It's no secret that as we're in our 30s, 40s, 50s, so on and so forth, it becomes more and more difficult to gain or even maintain muscle mass. And muscle mass is really important from just a general health and wellness perspective, but as well as continuing to participate in the sports that we love, we need to be able to maintain our muscle mass in doing so. And creatine can be a really helpful way to maintain that muscle mass with some proper strength training to go along with it so that we can maximize our efforts in our endurance sports of choice. Now, dosing protocols for creatine gets a little bit more complicated. Not unlike the beta-alanine, it is a habitual daily usage. Moreover, it's more of a lifetime regime, so something you need to budget in for the lifetime, or as long as you're going to be participating in some sort of sport, strength building, what have you. And generally, usage of creatine starts with a loading phase or saturation phase, and that's going to be upwards of about 20 grams per day for anywhere between about 5 and I've seen upwards of 10 days. After which you go into your maintenance dosage, usually between 5 and 10 grams, depending on A, your size, and B, how specialized you're going to be in kind of that weightlifting. I think for endurance athletes, you're going to stay on the lower end of that range. But it's pretty much a tasteless powder that you can add to any beverage. I do want to reiterate, please use creatine monohydrate. It's the most scientifically backed and proven form of creatine that you can use, and it's really not that expensive. Now, what are the downsides, and why do endurance athletes tend to stay away from creatine? I think first, there's a stigma or a stereotype that this is just for weightlifters or bodybuilders. That is unequivocally false, and I think more and more people are starting to embrace that and to espouse those benefits for more than just weightlifters. The second thing is the fact that that saturation is going to come with some weight gain on the scale. You're not adding adiposity. You're not even adding muscle mass. You are causing the muscles to hang on to more water. You should not be unfamiliar with this if you're an experienced endurance athlete, like glycogen. When you top the body up on glycogen, you're actually going to see weight gain on the scale because that glycogen holds more water. And you need to understand that in the long term, things are going to normalize, and your enhanced ability to maintain and build muscle and be able to use that explosive strength to train harder will help you with body recomposition. So you're going to transfer some of the adiposity that you might be carrying into usable working muscles. But people do have a rough time wrapping their head around anywhere between 2 and 5 pounds of weight on the scale that they feel isn't doing anything for them, and they may shy away from something like creatine. You have to decide whether or not you can get through that on your own. I know it's really tough for people to get their heads around, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that as a potential side effect. And lastly, folks with a more sensitive stomach or people on higher dosages might experience occasional bloating or cramping. It's not the most common side effect, and I think it's something that you just work your way into a dosage that works for you. But realistically, creatine has a lot of upside for very little downside. So look at your goals as an athlete and whether or not it fits into your regime. Now, the next supplement I want to spend a little time on here because there's a couple of different delivery methods, and I want to make sure that I am thorough with my discussion of sodium bicarbonate, or sodium bicarb, or just plain old baking soda. Sodium bicarbonate is effective in the same way that beta-alanine is effective. It helps you in terms of buffering those hydrogen ions and that lactate that's producing above and beyond your body's ability to clear it, and helps you with that 1 to 4 minute execution of power. The data indicates around a 1 to 3% improvement, so pretty similar to what you're going to see with the beta-alanine. However, you do not need to take this over time. It's something that has a more acute response. So you can take 0.2 to 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight about 60 to 90 minutes before you need to execute. But there is a huge caveat with this one, and there's a reason that it's not widely used. And that's because there's a very, very high risk of GI distress. It doesn't matter. You can have all the scientific benefit in the world when it comes to buffering that lactate. If you feel too ill to be able to execute, your performance gains are going to be lost. We are not just talking about people with a sensitive gut here. We are talking about general population. Majority of people really do not do well with it. Now, some people seem to have some luck kind of building up a tolerance to it. And if you're willing to do that experiment, it's relatively inexpensive, but I would certainly recommend doing that on an indoor trainer or treadmill or rowing machine in the comfort of your own home, near your own bathroom. I'm not kidding around with the stuff, ladies and gentlemen. You do not want to be stuck with an embarrassing or uncomfortable scenario, so you want to experiment with caution and understand that you may need to even scrap your session if you're going to experiment with sodium bicarbonate. I think a lot of you might be asking, well, what about lotion? Human makes PR lotion, which is topical sodium bicarbonate that helps us to offset the fact that we really don't tolerate it well orally. All the science shows that sodium bicarbonate works, so let's apply it topically. And what you're going to see are two camps of people responding to the sodium bicarb lotion. People who are going to swear by it and people who are going to say that it's complete snake oil. The fact is that the science is mixed. We're not talking about strict confirmation bias on either side, even though some of that does play in. The reason the science is mixed is because the results are mixed. And the reason that the results are mixed is because the molecules of sodium bicarbonate are too large to be absorbed transdermally or through the skin. Now, just because a molecule on its own is too large to be absorbed transdermally, our skin is evolved and there to protect us from absorbing things that might be harmful to us, doesn't mean it's impossible. There are several over-the-counter topicals, analgesics, even prescription medications that do a fine job of delivering molecules that are too large into the bloodstream, into the muscles, what have you. They do that by leveraging an active ingredient that will increase skin permeability. And for a number of different topical creams, gels, patches, the active ingredient is menthol. If you've ever put menthol on your skin, hell, if you've ever used a cough drop, you'll notice you'll get that instant cooling sensation. You almost feel like if it's on your skin that you have a breeze or some kind of chilling air that's entering into your skin. And that's because in reality, air is reaching deeper into your skin than it was before, because it's opening up those cavities or crevices, those pores within your skin, and it's going to make it more permeable for things to make their way through and be delivered and absorbed where they need to be absorbed. And this is really effective with the number of different compounds. The challenge with something like sodium bicarb is that it's still very large, and you really need to apply it generously to get a concentration of the sodium bicarb where you need to deliver it. And even with the menthol, it only penetrates so far. That's why if you've ever used that lotion, you know it stays on your skin like a paste. It's not something that works into the skin and gets absorbed in eventually like a regular lotion. It's almost like a sunscreen, but worse. It absorbs all the dirt, grit, and grime from the road because most of that sodium bicarb is staying on your skin. What they're trying to go for is that you get enough concentrated in an area and you open up that skin permeability such that you get some of that sodium bicarbonate delivered. So saying that you're going to get all of the benefit that's indicated by the science around sodium bicarbonate is a little bit disingenuous. You will probably get some if you apply it properly and generously, but what you're going to find is that it's just unreliable. You're going to find people who use it and pay for it that will be honest and tell you that sometimes it works and they can definitely tell a difference, and other times it doesn't work at all. It's not because they're crazy, it's not necessarily because of the placebo effect, it's because that's just luck of the draw as to whether or not you're going to be able to concentrate that sodium bicarbonate enough to be able to absorb it with the assistance of that menthol. My recommendation around the lotions is they're just not worth the money for the unreliable benefit that you get, and considering you're going to be wasting most of that ingredient. Even though the ingredient is cheap, the lotion is expensive to package, to add to the menthol. Unless you have an indiscriminate amount of income and you don't mind wasting the money for those marginal gains, you're better off finding your benefits somewhere else. The last supplement I want to talk about in the proven effective category is collagen. Collagen works by supporting your ligaments, your tendons, and your joints, making them more robust, helping them recover faster, and again, making them more injury resistant. Using it indirectly supports your performance because you can train more consistently, come back faster, work harder, and you're not sidelined in your training by some sort of injury. It's not completely foolproof, but it can help with some of those overuse injuries that you're going to sustain as a traditional endurance athlete. Now, collagen is another one of those supplements similar to creatine where it's more of a lifestyle supplement. It's something that you're going to take over the long term versus using it before some sort of activity or using it for a couple of weeks, if not months. The recommended dosage is between 10 and 15 grams per day, and it usually is absorbed better by taking it with maybe between 50 to 100 milligrams of vitamin C. Now, the trade-offs are potential challenges with collagen are a few. There's a decent amount of upside when it comes to taking care of your ligaments, joints, and tendons over the long term. You could have some mild bloating or discomfort on occasion with using collagen, but most people tend to tolerate it pretty well. Another challenge is that a good collagen peptide supplement can be relatively expensive. And if you're looking to use it, a 1-month supply at 10 grams per day is likely going to cost you between $30 upwards of $70 a month. It's not the most expensive supplement out there, but you want to make sure that you go after quality, and it is something that you're going to have to use routinely as long as you're a training athlete. And the third consideration is something that impacts me personally, and I'm sure it impacts several of you who are also either vegan or vegetarian, is collagen is an animal product derivative. It is not vegan or vegetarian, and right now there really is no non-animal based replacement that will give you the same benefit. There are ways to kind of approach those benefits, but no real supplement that can do what collagen can. What I will say is that I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, with all of the science behind things like lab-grown meats, stem cell research, that we're probably going to find a lab-synthesized collagen that has all the same benefits. So depending on your ethical or religious limitations and why you subscribe to the diet or lifestyle that you do, you may be able to get around something that doesn't require a live animal because it's being synthesized in the lab. I'm not in any real rush to reintroduce animal products to my diet. I don't miss meat or dairy personally, so even if you took the ethical component out, I'm probably not going back to those things. But I think collagen is one of the few things that are animal-based that I would reintroduce to my diet or supplementation regime because the evidence is so clear to help in terms of training as well as general longevity. So I want to keep the value judgment out of it. We all have our different crosses to bear, our own life decisions. Obviously, I'm not one that personally uses collagen, and I do struggle somewhat with my ability to recommend using collagen, but I'd be remiss if I just completely ignore the science and the evidence to say that collagen is a readily available supplement and it can really help you in terms of your joint health. Sarah from the future here, also wearing a winter hat on the inside of the house, so what else is new? But listen, this is a video I've been requested to make more times than I can count, and it's a can I've kicked down the road for years at this point. And not because of lack of interest, but because of my passion for the subject. Because it's a subject that I think deserves the context and the detail to help people to navigate through the morass of bullshit in this industry. I did not want to create another flash in the pan, rapid fire, here's my top 10, here's my top 5, spending 15 seconds talking about each of these supplements, because that's part of the problem. That type of content is part of the problem. And my intention here was to provide a comprehensive guide to these supplements and give folks enough detail that they could use this video alone to potentially make an informed decision as to whether to start, stop, or continue taking any of the supplements that I've talked about. But also for those who want a little bit more meat on the bone, although I do talk a lot, they can continue that research in an informed way, and the video can help them further deep dive into the science that is going to be applicable to them. In totality, this guide is going to end up being upwards of 50 to 60 minutes. And while I know that there are several of you that will watch that end to end and really glean the value from the content, I don't think the value proposition is there for most of the people who are coming to this video through subscription or search. I do not make short form content. That's not my shtick. People who come here and watch my videos watch long form content. This isn't about attention spans. It's about respecting the fact that each of you watching this video have a job, a family, school, some other things in your life that are going to compete with sitting down and spending upwards of an hour watching one of my videos, not to mention other content that you want to watch. I can't ask that my viewers are going to come and watch that long a video all at once, and I can't expect people to necessarily remember to come back to a video that they've watched part way through that ends up lost in a playlist somewhere. I think it makes more sense to break this into 2 parts so that people can watch part 1 and they can digest the information, they can engage in the conversation down below, and then I will release part 2 in short order. The video is already filmed. The content is done. This is not something that I might get back to. I will finish and release part 2 of the video, but I think this is the right thing to do for people who are watching this type of content, because the reason I'm doing this is not to inflate my own ego, but because I think arming people with this particular information is going to help to prevent them being susceptible to hype, bad marketing, or just strict manipulation that we're seeing rampant across social media. So I'm going to apologize for what seems like a rather abrupt ending to what should be a comprehensive guide. If you can help me out, do all of the engagement thingies down below. That really helps the algorithm to push long form content that it doesn't necessarily like, because this type of information is important to get out in front of people who might be using substances or supplements or considering using them when their health and their training is at stake. So thank you guys as always for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.